Здравствуйте, меня зовут Владимир Paperny. Я собираюсь прочесть лекцию об архитектуре парка Зарядье в Москве. Я дизайнер, историк архитектуры, историк культуры, профессор Калифорнийского университета. И в этой лекции я расскажу, как американская компания Dealers, Cofidio и Renfro пытается построить парк в самом центре Москвы, рядом с Красной площадью. Thank you, Michał. Thank you, Laura, Larissa Itina. Thanks to the Pushkin House, and thank you, everybody, for coming here. I will be talking about an American architect, Elizabeth Diller. From my perspective, he is probably the most interesting architect today. But I made a subtitle to this talk, which is Ready-Made, Doing Nothing, Testosterone-Fueled Architecture, and ZARYADYE Park. And I will explain each term later in my conversation. The reason we all should be interested in this lady is because she's a member of this architectural team that is building a park in Moscow. But it's a very strange situation. America is the enemy number one. I mean, it's become number one and then number two, but America is still the enemy, the official enemy. And it's a unique situation. An American architectural team is building a park next to Red Square, Kremlin, and the St. Basil Cathedral. It's probably the most sacred place of the whole Russia. What's going on? How can we explain it, and how do they get together? How do they collaborate? And what's interesting is that it's already underway. The official opening will be in September. So let me talk about Elizabeth Diller, who, as I said, I think is one of the most interesting architects today. We can say a few things about her just by watching this photograph. First of all, we can see that she is an architect who reads books, and I've been to many architects' offices, but usually their libraries are full of those huge volumes on, Palladio, Michelangelo, and then they're beautiful, extremely expensive, and they look like nobody ever opens them. This is a different situation. You can see color stickers on the books, so she works with them. She somehow classifies them, and I looked at the books. She has books on philosophy, on theory, so she's an unusual architect who reads philosophy and theory. Not the only one, but she is in the minority. Brief story. She was born in Poland. She was born in Łódź, as they say in Poland, and her first language was Polish. And so when I first interviewed her, I started saying, "Czy pani mówi po polsku?" And she started laughing and said, "No so dobrze." And then this way we exhausted our knowledge of the language and we switched to English. She moved to the United States at the age of 5, and her parents, she was born in a Jewish family, and the parents were not really dissidents, but her father was a staunch capitalist, and as a capitalist he was arrested a few times, and the father's dream was to go to the United States, and eventually it was possible. In 1959, it was not only possible, there was an idea of pushing the Jews out of Poland, so their desires coincided. She entered the Cooper Union. The reason, it's a great architectural school, but one of the reasons she went there, it's the only private university that provides free education, and the family didn't have any money. Then she was teaching in Cooper Union, then she was teaching at Princeton, and there were two professors that really impressed her. One was John Haydock, and John Haydock was one of the group called the Five Architects, who were supposed to be traditional modernists as opposed to postmodernists. But as Liz explained to me, only three of them were real modernists: Richard Meyer, Michael Graves, and what's the other one who recently died? Doesn't matter. The other two, Peter Eisenman and John Haydock, always wanted to look outside of architecture for ideas and inspiration, and that's what attracted her to these two. The other person who made an impression was Riccardo Scafidio, and she was so impressed that she married him. And they formed their first company. It was dealer Scafidio, and I think the most exciting things that they were produced at this early stage when they worked together. They didn't have big architectural clients. They didn't have to work with building industry restrictions, and the most interesting ideas were produced at that time. And then there's a list of some of the awards that she received, and it's probably 1/10. The company, before they added Charles Renfro in 1997 and after, there are many, many awards. Now, if we look at the company's site, it's not a typical site of an architect. First of all, it's almost impossible to use. Everything is moving, jumping, and if you look for any specific information on a specific project, it's not easy. And I think it's done on purpose because one of the early ideas was to break the boundaries of architecture and go into artistic art installations, performances, and the site is possibly a remnant of this early philosophy. But it's really exciting. If you somehow manage to find the information you want, it's all chronological. So the first row is the most current projects, and in the back are the older ones. If you go there, I suggest you go to the very back and start from those early projects. That's where the really exciting ideas were born, and one of the reasons was that they didn't have the restrictions of building codes, clients, costs. There are many theatrical installations and just things like this. Anyway, she mentioned a few times in my interview with her and in other interviews that the artistic environment of New York in 1970s was this very exciting space where artists, designers, architects, sculptors were trying different things, and they were trying to break the boundaries between different professions, between art and architecture, design, performance, and whatever. And she mentioned a few names of people who made a profound influence. One of them was Robert Smithson, who was involved in land art. And we'll see in some of the projects of Dealer Scafidio and Renfro a lot of kind of references to land art. There are, some of their projects have something to do with land art, including the Zaryadye Park. The other person she always mentions is Gordon Matta Clark, who died very young in 1978, but he was involved in something that Liz Diller considers architecture, but it's a strange architecture. He would find a house in New York that was soon to be demolished, and he would bring some heavy-duty equipment, and he would cut round holes, square holes, and create unusual perspectives of the interior, exterior, and you can see by destroying architecture, which was to be destroyed anyway, he allowed the viewer to see how it was made, and it created some deeper understanding of architecture, at least for Liz Diller. A very scandalous project by Vita Acconci also was very important for Liz Diller. It was a very shocking installation where in a gallery in New York they created this slanted floor under which the artist was hidden, and he had a microphone, and there were speakers in the space, and he was talking into the microphone, reacting to the steps that he would be hearing, and then he would he would be saying things about his sexual fantasies, what he is doing with this person, which he imagined. And at the same time, he was masturbating under the floor, and it was going on for 7 days. It's a shocking installation, but for Liz, she said it was very important because, again, it showed that architecture could be created by very unusual means, like by somebody's erotic fantasies that would fill the audio space. But for her, it was still architecture. But the most important person was, of course, Marcel Duchamp, who died in '68. I don't know if she personally met him or not, but what Marcel Duchamp was doing turned out to be probably the most durable influence. And we'll see traces of Duchamp's ideas in their later things. And one of the ideas was the idea of ready-made, when you take an everyday object and frame it, either putting in a real frame or putting it on a pedestal or just exhibiting in a gallery space. This you take, you convert this object into something else. It acquires a different meaning, like this famous sculpture that he called Fountain, made out of a real urinal. Everybody knows this project. Anyway, one of the first projects was what they call Slow House. It was really built in the state of New York. And the Slow House, there are two ideas there. One, the idea of slow. They were saying that the contemporary life is too fast. People are moving too fast. They don't have time to stop and see. And the second idea was, again, ready-made. So the house had one wall that had a huge window. Through this window, you could see the ocean. It's on the ocean shore. The idea behind it was based on reading real estate brochures. By reading real estate brochures, they realized that the view from the house has a lot of it's very important for the price of the house. You can sell the house with a higher price if the view is important, or if you can see water or mountain or another famous house. So what they did, they made the house in such a shape that just walking through this space, you always see this huge window and you see the water. In addition to this, they created a video made from the same point, and they projected this video on the same window. So it created this kind of a, I don't know how to describe it, strange merging of two almost identical images, but one was real, the other one was a video, and two videos were superimposed. And of course, it's the idea of ready-made. The ready-made object was the water, but by framing it, they turned it into something else. Another famous ready-made project was Highline Park in New York. Very successful project, very popular. But here again, those two components, the idea of slow, the idea of ready-made. Obviously, it's ready-made because they used abandoned industrial railroad, elevated. Now, as far as slow, they say that this park is very unusual because there is nothing you can do there. You cannot play football, you cannot play with kites, you cannot do anything that people usually do in the parks. The only thing you can do, you can walk, sit, and contemplate. In addition to doing nothing, they created a space where you can see nothing. They created the auditorium where you can sit and watch cars moving on 10th Avenue in New York, nothing else. And it turned out that it's a very popular place. You go there, you see people sitting there and watching cars moving back and forth on 10th Street, and it has some hypnotizing effect, which is very unusual for American users of parks, because a typical American cannot be idle. The typical American is either working or lifting weights or texting or whatever, but doing nothing is very foreign to a typical American. But by creating the space where you can do nothing and see nothing, surprisingly, they attracted a lot of people. Another concept is what they call aesthetics of danger. There was an early project of 1986 called The Bridge. Under the Brooklyn Bridge, there is a strange space where they created another structure, collapsible, so you can bring it, you can expand it, and then you can collapse it and take it away. And it was just performance, one-time performance, where on fairly high level of this bridge, especially trained probably gymnast or some circus performer was walking without any protection, and that created the sense of danger in the audience. And when I asked Liz about this, I said, it's interesting that you could do this because you were not an architect at that time. But as an architect, you cannot play with danger because there's building codes. Nobody will let you create any sense of danger because it's against the profession. It says, oh, not at all. And she reminded me about this project. It's Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, 2006. And you can see that underneath this hanging structure, there is, again, a slanted floor. And if you go inside, you will see that it's a fairly steep floor. You have computers, and again, it's ready-made because there is water framed by the window. And when the sponsors of this project saw this proposal, they panicked. They said, "You cannot do this. This is too dangerous. People will start falling down and breaking the glass and just falling into water." And it took Liz's incredible negotiating skills to convince them that it only creates the sense of danger, but there's no real dangers, no real danger. And from 2006 to 2017, the number of people who fell through the window is 0. So it worked so far. And in the ZARYADYE Park proposal, we have the same idea of playing with danger. There is a bridge. Critics of the project say, "Oh, it's a bridge from nowhere to nowhere." This is true. It's a bridge from nowhere to nowhere, but it's elevated. It's very high, and the railing is just sheets of glass, so you cannot really fall, but you see what's behind. So there is a sense of danger there, and they created a video that shows how it works, and you can see that I would be nervous walking there. Another famous project and very successful project was their reconstruction of the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts in New York City. And that's where she used this expression, testosterone-fueled architecture. It's a project of those three modernist architects. Philip Johnson was the most famous of them, but also there's Wallace Harrison and Max Abramovitz. The problem with this proposal, according to Liz Diller, was that it was completely separated from street life. There was no connection to the street. And also, the whole design didn't have any unity, because she says all those white men, they were fighting, they hated one another, each one has a blown up ego, and they had to create a kind of a general plan for everybody, but they couldn't agree. It was only Philip Johnson who somehow managed to convince them to get together, and he created the general plan of the site and convinced others to do this. Lincoln Center was for a long time considered obsolete aesthetically and technically. It was hard to use. So in 1999, they started a series of competitions for remodeling of the center. And many architectural companies participated. Richard Meyer with Arata Isadzaki, Norman Foster, Calatrava, Rafael Maneo, and Dealers Cafidia and Renfro. They won the competition. What's interesting that everybody else except for them wanted to demolish everything and build some new beautiful structure, which would cost an enormous amount of money. First of all, demolition is very expensive, and then cleaning the site and building. The budgets proposed by all those companies was enormous. Dealers Cafidia and Renfro was the only company who said, you don't have to demolish anything. It's fine. All you have to do is just open the space to the street, and introduce some elements that would make it more approachable and accessible. And this is what they did. First of all, they created, it's almost a Baroque idea. It's a staircase that leads somebody from the street into this cathedral of art, so to speak. They didn't change anything about the real architecture. But the interesting detail, each step, the vertical panel of each step is a message board where you walking from the street, you can read and know everything that's going on in those three buildings. And also, nobody comes to Lincoln Center in a private car, so they didn't make any parking space there. Everybody is using a taxi cab, or Uber, or subway. So today, people are walking there from the street, so they created this entrance space. Additionally, they created two walkways on the sides with those clear glass roofs in case of snow, rain, or whatever. If you don't want to use the central staircase, you can use those ramps on the side. Now, one of the most difficult clients that they had was Eli Broad. Eli Broad is the guy for whom they built the Broad Museum in Los Angeles, and it stands just next to Frank Gehry's Walt Disney Concert Hall. Eli Broad is one of the richest men in California, and he made his fortune by through his company KB Homes. KB stands for Kaufman Broad Homes, by creating standard and very inexpensive houses, which they sold all over the United States. Typical houses. The reason they are able to sell them very cheap is because they are very tough negotiators. They squeeze their contractors, builders, and everybody, every penny. Therefore, the end user can benefit from getting inexpensive houses, but that creates problems with subcontractors and builders. There are always protests. None of those houses is something that Eli Broad would want to live in, and that's not a reflection of his tastes. He loves contemporary art. His favorite artist is Jeff Koons. He photographed with Jeff Koons's sculpture. So in a sense, his lifestyle is a realization of this saying, sell to the masses and eat with the classes. That's exactly what he is doing. He's notorious in bad relationships with his architects. He had a very serious conflict with Frank Gehry, who built his private house many years ago, and then there was a conflict with the Walt Disney Concert Hall, where he was one of the sponsors, and he wanted to fire Frank Gehry and hire a cheaper architect. He had problems with Renzo Piana, who built the first Broad Museum in Los Angeles on LACMA's territory. And there were rumors that he wanted to save money by eliminating toilets, but fortunately the building code didn't allow this. But his relationship with Renzo Piano was also very sour. And I asked Liz, I said, well, you're dealing with really tough client. How did it go with you? And then she said, you know, these were, again, those men with exaggerated sense of ego and aggression, and so they were fighting with Eli. I personally like tough clients because they usually know what they want, and I usually enjoy working with them. Whether it was just diplomacy or real feelings, I don't know, but probably both. But there were losses working with Eli Broad. When I was at their office in New York, I saw a little pieces of a model of this wall structure. And they designed it in such a way to be made of some semi-translucent material. So at night, the whole building would be glowing. And Eli Broad said, no, 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 too expensive, and replace it with something that is not translucent. But still, it's a great space, and it's much more interesting inside than outside. Outside, the only noticeable feature is this kind of a pushed by the thumb window. The rest is kind of very uniform. And again, it was conscious decision because it stands next to Frank Gehry's Disney Hall, which is all outside. It's like a flower that is open to the outside space. And inside, it's much less interesting than outside. They wanted something completely opposite because they were competing with a famous, great architect. And this is how this window looks from the inside. There is a little blob. And again, she said that maybe it was just testosterone-fueled conflict. And now let's talk about Zaryadye Park in Moscow. And this photograph was taken maybe a month ago. I didn't take it. I found it on the site. And what we see here is the bridge from nowhere to nowhere, not finished. So we know that the official opening will be in September. So it will be, I'm sure it will be done the way the 5-year plan under Stalin was made in 4 years. So something like this will happen here. And in the model, we see, again, this dangerous bridge. The main idea of the plan was that Russia has many different geographic areas and a different climate in each. So they wanted to create part that would have 4 areas: tundra, steppe, forest, and wetlands. And they wanted to create them in such a way that, for example, all year round, this area will maintain the climate that they designed specifically there. This is a little video that they made of their proposal. Of course, we see typical Russian birch trees, which is symbol of Russia for many people. We also see the ice cave that is supposed to be icy all year round, the restaurant. Here's an interesting thing, the roof that becomes a green lawn. And I put this project there. This is the roof of a restaurant they created at the Lincoln Center with the same idea, when the roof becomes a green lawn. So they have their own library of solutions that they use in many different projects. For example, here, again, an idea of ready-made. They created a window where you can see Kremlin. Again, so Kremlin, in a sense, becomes like the urinal of Duchamp. And then there was an interesting development. The deputy mayor of Moscow, Marat Husnulin, after they received the first prize, won the competition, basically, he said, yes, we like their project, but number 2, number 3, and number 4, they also have interesting ideas. So I think we will just combine the best elements of each project, and so the final project will be much better this way because we'll use all the good ideas that other people had. So for Liz and her partners, it was something unheard of. They had old-fashioned ideas of copyrights and ownership of the project, but for the mayor of Moscow and the people there, it was a normal procedure. This is the projects that they wanted to combine. What's interesting that the same procedure was used in 1930s when they were designing the palace of the Soviets. They had 3 completely different winning projects by Eofan, Gelfreich, and Shukov, 3 architects. One was something like, San Marco Square in Venice. Eofan was a modernist architect, and they were told, very good, now make one project out of them, and they worked for many years and created something like this, but it's only one of their ideas. They had the square base pyramid, they had the round, and as we know, it was never built, but the idea of combining good elements of different ideas and putting them together in a hope that it will be some kind of a explosion of quality is very typical. So there are some losses for Leverhulme and Renfer. One of them is the Philharmonic, the concert hall that they designed was taken from them and given to Vladimir Plotkin, the Russian architect, who is a good architect. This is what he came up with. It's not terribly bad, but they were a little upset, but they accepted it. They said, that's fine, we are okay. But then I was in their office in 2015, and I was showing them photographs, and I showed this photograph. And Liz Ziller said, oh my God, what is this? I said, well, it's the chief architect of Moscow, Sergei Kuznetsov, and there are priests. And said, what are they doing in the pit? I said, they're, what's the word, consecration. And she says, why? And I said, well, there is a Russian tradition. And she says, Charles, come here. Look what Vladimir is showing. Charles Renfro comes and he says, what is this? And I said, well, I explain. He says, oh, that's fine. I have no problem with this. And he leaves. Then I tell her about the Saint Vladimir statue, and there was kind of a people's competition when people made a proposal where to put them. And at that time, there was a proposal to put them right at the entrance of the ZARYADYE park. And I showed this to Liz. She says, oh my God, what is this? I said, well, don't panic. It's not decided. It's just a proposal by somebody. It's not even by an architect. She says, Charles, come here. Look what Vladimir is showing. Charles Renfro comes in and says, this is completely impossible. It's right where our bridge from nowhere to nowhere is supposed to be. We cannot make it around this crazy statue. Fortunately, as we know, it was they found a different place for Saint Vladimir, and here we see the opening of the statue. There is Putin, the sculptor, the mayor Sobyanin, and of course the priest who is also doing something with this. Recently, so nobody really knows exactly what will be there. I mean, there are some. We know that the music hall will be built by Vladimir Plotkin, and we know how it will look. But I'm sure there will be some surprises. There was criticism of the project from different sources. One was by some architects who said the whole project is crazy because how it came about, and we all know how it came about. It was a conversation between Vladimir Putin and Sergei Sobyanin, who is the mayor of Moscow. They were riding in a car by the demolished Hotel Russia, who was at that time. And Putin said, "Look, isn't it a good place for a park?" And Sobyanin said, "Perfect idea. It's a great place for a park." That's how the competition started. So the architects say, it's not the way you do urban planning. Why park? And they say the whole urban planning, especially under Stalin and later, was creating empty spaces. Look, Red Square was never empty. In the 19th century, it was full of buildings and shops and everything, but then they made it empty. Now we're creating, demolished the hotel and creating another empty spaces. So the Russian urban planning is basically creating empty spaces. Basically, soon the whole Moscow will be an empty space. So that was one line of criticism. Has nothing to do with dealers, Scafidi and Renfro, because they don't know how decisions are made in Russia, and it's not their fault. They got the conditions for the competition. They made their proposal, which I think was a brilliant proposal to create those 4 geographic zones. Again, they wanted to use all their favorite ideas. They created this ready-made frames. They wanted it to be a slow space where people can slow down and relax. And the other line of criticism came from the preservationists. There is an organization called Arknadzor, which they usually translate as architectural watchdog or something like this. And I know about this organization a lot because my wife was one of the founders of this movement, and now she lives with me in Los Angeles, but she still keeps close ties with the movement. So one of the members of this Arknadzor movement, Rustam Rahmatulin, who is probably the most forceful and aggressive protector of architectural masterpieces, he is very negative about the proposal, and what he says, Zaryadye is now being built in the tradition that treated Moscow as a blank sheet, when it was possible to demolish parts of the Kremlin in both the 18th and the 20th century. So total disregard to the archaeological stuff that was in the ground, and even some buildings that were there. And also, it was a violation of all the UNESCO recommendation about this place, because UNESCO said that Kremlin may lose the status of an cultural and architectural monument if you do crazy things like this. So all that was disregarded. And actually some historical houses on Varvarka Street have been demolished to build the park. And just as an epilogue, I can tell you that I met with Liz Diller just a few weeks ago in Los Angeles. She came, there was a little conference in the Broad Museum. And she was making a speech there. So after the speech, she was surrounded by people. I walked to her. We didn't have a chance to talk at length, but I said, just tell me what's going on with the ZARYADYE Park. And she just made some gesture, which I interpreted as, don't remind me about sad subjects. So apparently she was upset. On the other hand, Charles Renfro is much more optimistic, her partner, and they also have a Russian partner, the City Makers company, and Pyotr Kudryavtsev, who is the head of the City Makers. When I made this presentation in Moscow 3 days ago, he said, I have to correct. Vladimir, it's not as gloomy as he presents. Major elements of the project have been preserved, and I object to this negative presentation of our project. So we all will see what happens in September. Maybe I'm wrong. Thank you.